Our final take on this topic is with afternoon host John Mecure at Newsradio 620 WTMJ. And John, thanks very much for being here. You have talked a lot about this issue, spent a lot of time on this, talking about it with your listeners. Statistically, we're seeing things improving. We're seeing fewer alcoholic-related deaths, crashes, arrests. But is the culture changing? Are we moving the ball forward?
That's the question. Are we moving the ball forward? You know, when you look at this issue, Charles Shannon, there's a couple things to think about. Why does the ball move so slowly? Really, there's three basic things at play here. One is lobbying. The Tavern League of Wisconsin, who sent you the statement earlier this year, they spend $100,000 a year in cash lobbying our legislators. Miller Coors, they spend $100,000 a year in cash lobbying our legislators. But the non-traditional lobbying that they take part in, the hosting of fundraisers for our legislators, the relationships they have with individual towns where legislators reside, that carries a lot of weight when it comes time to pass bills. So lobbying is one thing. Cost concerns, which Representative Ott mentioned, another factor. Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald says he's reluctant to pass a lot of these measures because he doesn't know who will pay for extra prosecutors, extra jails, extra measures that would go into effect. And the third thing I want to mention is the culture. You asked about the culture. The culture is so deeply ingrained here in Wisconsin. Just today I looked up a couple headlines, and this gives you an idea about the culture in Wisconsin. These headlines are almost celebrating our drinking culture, real headlines from Wisconsin newspapers. 12 of 20 drunkest American cities are in Wisconsin, with an exclamation point. Another headline, Wisconsin's bar to grocery store ratio puts the rest of the country to shame. It is in our culture, and we've got to try to find a way to change that if we want what happens on the roads to change.
Do you think, though, it's important to start with the younger generation? Because cultural things, I'm not from Milwaukee. However, I've lived here long enough to see that in everything we do, it breathes drinking. I mean, we have a baseball team called the Brewers.
Exactly.
But how
who play at Miller Park.
Who play at Miller Park, right? So how do we get to the younger generation so that they don't get behind the wheel?
You know, that is a good question, and that's where some of the effort lies. Jim Ott will tell you that he is working on legislation that increases funding for schools, that reaches that younger generation. It's leading by example. It's if you're the adult or you're the decision maker in the House, leading by example. And that is part of it, but the other part of it is that we are the only state in Wisconsin, in the country, where first-time driving is treated like rolling through a stop sign.
It's a slap on the wrist.
And a soft slap on the wrist.
So when you were talking to listeners, when you were working on this project to sort of get people, are people on board? Are they slowly getting on board? I mean, do people really want change in Wisconsin?
That's a very good question. That's a tough question. They say they want change. Everybody says, oh, this is terrible, we want change. But when you look at actual survey results, and there was one out 2 years ago, people by and large do not want first-time drunk driving to be a criminal offense. So they say it's terrible, but when it comes down to it, I think a lot of people say, that could maybe be me someday, and they want a mulligan.
But that's the other thing, Charles, when you think about it, a lot of people don't get behind the issue until it impacts them at home.
As we heard from Paula. So,
Yeah.
all right.